Let's begin with the case file of this incident. Dyatlov Pass incident is a dramatic and mysterious true story that unfolded in Sverdlov Oblastov, USSR in 1959. It occurred on the eastern slopes of Kolat-Syakhl Mountain, located in the Ural Mountains. The details concerning this case are so mysterious and confusing at the same time that they could be refuted as a conspiracy story, yet multiple evidences that cover real records, pictures, files, autopsy reports, and official documents strongly point out that every bit of Dyatlov Pass incidents is true and not a hoax. Mount Kolat-Syakhl literally means the Mountain of the Dead in the local language of the Mansi tribe of Siberian natives. It had already gained negative notoriety long before the Dyatlov Pass incident, which occurred on the side of this mountain. Mansi and other local tribes were never conquered by the European settlers. Rather, they coexisted for centuries with little or no contact on vast stretches of land. Legend goes that 9 Mansi hunters had spent a night during their hunting trip on this mountain, and next morning were found dead by their friends. None of them showed any signs of violent death. Hence, the mountain and nearby Dyatlov Pass were regarded as haunted, but never considered sacred as reported by the media. Local native tribes avoided this peak completely, and never tried to visit it during their hunts. Igor Dyatlov, who was the leader of these hikers, was especially captivated by Mansi people, and even made his own Mansi Russian dictionary, which he also took with him on his last trip. It could be considered a cute local legend, but increased active exploration of this region in the second half of the 20th century supported the deadly name of the mountain. To this day, people are dying there. The cause of their deaths often cannot be attributed to any rational explanation. Also, in particular, the number 9 seems to play a strange role in the death of many tourists, geologists, and those who dared to visit this very place. Named after one of the students on the trek, Igor Dyatlov, Dyatlov Pass incident has become a front for endless conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, aliens, and the abominable snowman stories. Today, it is regarded as Russia's biggest unsolved mystery, and to this day, their state television regularly cover outlandish explanations of experts from different areas of study. Before we go into the details of this case, I have to inform you about the latest developments on this case. Around a year ago, Russian Prosecutor General's office announced a new inquiry to finally put an end to the growth of rumors and to establish the truth. Russian investigators have traveled to the area to reenact parts of the incidents and are expected to announce the results of their findings soon. Natalia Barsagova, who has been regularly publishing stories on the case, said, "It's our Soviet mystery that we want to solve. Every person who starts researching it thinks he's the one who can solve it, but the deeper he goes, the more the swamp sucks him in. In my personal opinion, one thing is for sure. A definite closure of Dyatlov Pass incident will be elusive. It is highly unlikely that even a conclusive judgment will ever be able to silence all of the speculations." Now let's get into the details of all aspects of this gripping story. To get a detailed grip on the facts of this case, we need to understand the composition of Dyatlov team and the relevant experiences in trekking. These past experiences and accomplishments in trekking are quite important in countering some of the arguments made later in the discussion of possible theories as to what really happened. The Dyatlov ski team consisted of 8 men and 2 women, who, except for Alexander Zolotaryov, were mostly students or graduates from the Ural Polytech Institute, located in Sverdlovsk Oblast, Russia. Igor Dyatlov. This whole incident is named after the leader of ill-fated hiking group, Igor Dyatlov. At the time, he was a student of UPI University. He was considered a talented engineer who designed and assembled a radio himself that was used during hikes in the Sayan Mountains. As a group leader, he was brave, confident, experienced, and passionate. On one such campaign, a member secretly ate a can of condensed milk from team's ration. Regretting his decision later, he told Igor about it. Igor stayed silent and did not shame or scold that team member, but rather said, "We will return to Sverdlovsk. You will pay the cost of the condensed milk to the group's cash desk." The incident was later remembered for many years. Yuri Doroshenko. Yuri Doroshenko had an impulsive personality and was famous for once running at a giant bear with a geologist hammer to save his groupmates. He was quite reserved, but brave, and was also once involved in a relationship with Zina Kolmogorova and even met her parents. Although they broke up before this expedition, he still kept a good relationship with her and Igor. Lyudmila Dubinina. She was a fourth-year student in UPI University and was the youngest of the Dyatlov group. She had considerable mountaineering experience. On one such hike, a hunter accompanying the students accidentally shot her in the leg. Although wounded, she bravely faced the situation and went back alone on the lengthy and painful journey. Yuri Krivonishenko. Yuri was a friend of Dyatlov group and always took part in almost all of the expeditions led by Igor. He was known as a joker of the team and always looked to amuse his friends with jokes or by playing mandolin. His clothes would later bear traces of radioactivity that some people linked to this incident, but I think as a specialist engineer, he had the required knowledge, know-how, and means to avoid any unwanted radioactive exposure. Alexander Kolevatov. He was a fourth-year student at the UPI University and also worked as a ski tour instructor. He joined Dyatlov's expedition to achieve promotion to the rank of master or expert instructor by adding performance points to his degree. Before joining this expedition, he had already hiked the Mount Salvia, which was considered a quite difficult trek. Dyatlov group seemed to have celebrated Alexander's birthday on January 30th. His present was a tangerine, which he readily distributed among his friends. This took place 2 days before they all perished in the treacherous Ural Mountains. Nikolai Thibault Brino. Thibault graduated in 1958 with major in civil engineering from UPI University. At the time of his death, he was working at the construction department of Sverdlovsk. He also had experience in hiking trips of various categories of difficulty and was very popular among UPI students and members of the sports club. Everybody who knew Thibault noted his energy, inventiveness, friendliness, and humor. Semyon Alexandrovich Zolotaryov. Semyon was an instructor at Koryovska tour base at the time of his death. He was the oldest and also the most mysterious member of the group. He asked to be called Sasha, and that's the name that appears in many documents and memoirs. Semyon served in the military through the entire Second World War and also got 4 military awards. His military past has a special role in the events of the tragic night. He did not know the other team members before this expedition, but was recommended by friends of the team from the sports club. He was accepted into the team, and according to the diaries of team members, he cooperated and worked well with all of them. Zinaida Alexeyevna Kolmogorova. She was a 5th-year student at the UPI University and was an experienced hiker who had her share of difficulties. On one of her hikes, she was bitten by a viper snake, and although suffering from pain, she refused to cause hardships for others by lightening her load. People who knew her said that she was the engine of the university. She was always full of ideas and liked by everyone. As a result, people were naturally drawn to her. She was very outgoing, energetic, and had gone to 6 expeditions before this. 4 of these were second category of complexity. Rustem Vladimirovich Slobodin. He graduated from the UPI University in 1958. He was often remembered as quite athletic, honest, courageous, dependable, adventurous, decent, and a man of few words. He was also a long-distance runner, and his previous trekking experience made him quite valuable in this expedition. Yuri Yudin. Yuri Yudin was the sole survivor of the Dyatlov incident. On 28 January, after suffering from several health ailments including rheumatism and a congenital heart defect, he turned back due to knee and joint pain that made him unable to continue the hike. He passed away in 2013 at 75 years of age. Now, let's take a close look at the chain of events as they happened. On January 25th, 1959, the group arrived by train at Ivdel, a small town at the center of northern province of Sverdlovsk Oblast in Russia. From here, they took a truck to Vizhai, a small lorry village that is the last inhabited settlements in the north. Their goal was to reach Otterten, a mountain located at 10 kilometers north of the site of the incident, in 14 days. During this time of the season, this trekking route was considered as Category 3, the most difficult. After reaching Vizhai, the skiers purchased the essential supplies and ate loaves of bread to keep their energy levels up for the following day's hike. The team started their journey towards Otterten from Vizhai on January 27th. On January 28th, Yuri Yudin turned back due to knee and joint pain. that made it impossible for him to continue the hike. The remaining group of 9 people continued their hike. Investigators used the diaries and cameras found at their last campsite to track the group's route up to the day preceding the incident. The group arrived at that edge of a highland area on January 31st and began preparing for the climb. They stored their excess food and gear on a platform in the forest called Labaz. On February the 1st, they started to move through the pass. According to their plans, they wanted to get over the pass that day and made camp on the opposite side, but lost their direction and deviated west, up towards the top of Kholat Syakhl due to worsening weather conditions, snowstorms, and decreased visibility. After realizing their mistake, they decided to stop and camp on the slope of the mountain instead of moving 1.5 kilometers downhill to a forested area that would have offered a much better protection against bad weather elements. It was postulated that Dyatlov probably did not want to lose the altitude they had gained, or he decided to practice camping on the mountain slope. They set up their camp on the slope of Kholat Syakhl around 5 p.m. Around 6 to 7 p.m., they had their dinner, and 2 members, Semyon and Thibaut, went outside to relieve themselves, as they were the only members who were much better dressed than the others. And then, something went catastrophically wrong. It was agreed beforehand that once the skiers had returned to Vizhai, Dyatlov would send a telegram to the sports club. The expected date of their return was determined to be no later than February 12th, but Dyatlov had told Urin that due to the difficulty of the trek, he expected it to take longer, so no immediate reaction was taken as days passed on and no message received from them. After the relatives of skiers demanded answers, the head of the university ordered a rescue operation consisting of volunteer students and teachers. On February 20th, army and police also became involved, and planes and helicopters also joined the rescue operation. On the morning of February 26, rescuers found their abandoned and badly damaged tents on Kholat Syakhl. The rescuer who found the tent said that the tent was half torn down and covered with snow. It was empty, and all the group's belongings and shoes had been left behind. Investigators said that the tent had been cut open from the inside, and skiers had fled in socks or barefoot. Investigators found a chain of 8 or 9 sets of footprints left by several people who were wearing socks, a single shoe, or barefoot, going down the hill toward the edge of nearby woods on the opposite side of the pass. But after 500 meters, these footprints were covered with snow. At the edge of the forest, under a large old cedar tree, the rescuers found the remains of a fire along with the first 2 bodies of Yuri Krivoshenko and Yuri Doroshenko. They both were not wearing any footwear and were dressed only in their underpants. The branches on the cedar tree were broken up to the height of 5 meters, suggesting that skiers had climbed up the tree to look for something. Forensic tests conducted on the bark of the tree had traces of their skin embedded in it, suggesting that the pair had frantically attempted to climb the tree while snapping off the branches until their hands turned into just a mass of pulpy flesh. Medical examiner also reported that the bodies had livor mortis on the front. If a body had been pressed against the ground, normally, these marks appear on the sides. This suggested that their bodies had been turned over after their death. Next morning, on February 27th, rescuers also found the bodies of group leader Igor Dyatlov and Zina Kolmogorova at a distance of around 300 and 630 meters respectively between the cedar tree and their tent. After searching for 6 days, they also found body of Rustem Slobodin on March 5th at a distance of 480 meters from the cedar. From the state of their bodies and poses, investigators determined that they were trying to return to their tent. Autopsy report found no deadly injuries, and it was concluded that they had died of hypothermia. Rustem had a small fracture in his skull, but it was not considered as a fatal wound. A proper investigation was started as soon as the first 5 bodies were discovered, but the search for remaining 4 bodies took investigators more than 2 months. On May 5th, body of these 4 skiers were also found in a ravine at a distance of 75 meters further down into the woods from the cedar tree under 4 meters of snow. These 4 bodies were better dressed than the others, and it appeared that they were wearing clothes from their team members who had died earlier. A detailed examination of these 4 bodies changed the whole course of the investigation. Bodies of 3 of the skiers had fatal injuries. Nikolai had suffered major skull damage, and bodies of both Lyudmila's and Semyon's had major chest fractures. According to the medical examiner, Dr. Boris Vorshrutsdeny, the force required to cause such injuries would be extremely high. He compared their injuries to the injuries suffered in a fatal car crash. Most important point here was that they had no external wounds, as if they were crippled by a high level of pressure. Judging from the state of their bodies, it appeared that they clearly realized their threats and tried their best to preserve themselves. They had dug out in a den in the snow and laid branches of trees in it to keep themselves warm. Here, things got even more strange, as their actual bodies were discovered at a distance of few feet from their den in the deepest part of the ravine. Some of their clothing items were found to be radioactive, and some of the clothes that they took from bodies underneath the cedar tree were just placed on the branches. The skiers could not get a chance to use these clothing items. Once we start analyzing details of their injuries and consider the factors that could have caused those types of injuries, we come to the conclusion that things are not as simple as they seem. Also, this evidence would later help us in countering against the possible explanations of this incident. Yuri Doroshenko. Yuri was the most sturdy and tallest member of the group. His complexion had changed into brown-purple. He was wearing a set of wool socks on both feet and had no shoes on. Socks on left foot were burned. Liver mortar spots on his body were found at the back of neck, torso, and extremities, but his body was found in a different position, which indicated that his body had been moved once the blood had stopped circulating. His ears, nose, and lips were covered with blood, and his body was still trying to fight the freezing at the time of death. On his right cheek was found a foamy gray fluid. Some investigators speculated that before his death, someone or something was pressing on his chest. Back then, this was a common interrogation method used by NKVD, Stalin's secret police, and special forces. Another possible explanation could be a straight fall from the tree. This aspect was ignored in the final autopsy report that stated his cause of death as hypothermia. Yuri Krivonishenko. Rescuers found body of Yuri underneath the cedar tree. He was dressed in a undershirt, long-sleeved checkered shirt, swimming pants, long underpants, and torn sock on his left foot. He was not wearing any footwear. The cause of his death was hypothermia. Presence of skin between his teeth indicated that in order to stay on the tree for as long as possible, he bit his own hand in an effort to awaken his irresponsive hands, or he was trying to stifle a cry. Both Doroshenko and Krivonishenko froze to death. After their death, in order to keep themselves warm, their clothes were removed by their friends. One of the most common myths that surrounds their death is the theory of paradoxical undressing. This theory simply ignores the fact that their friends removed their clothes after they had died, and in some cases, also had used a knife to cut different articles of clothing. This also showed a clear logical will to live on part of surviving members. They were not in a state of panic and had not done any illogical actions. Their bodies were carefully and respectfully laid side by side, and their possessions were divided by their friends equally. Igor Dyatlov. Dyatlov's body was found face up, and his head towards the tent. Only his clenched fists were visible above the snow. His unbuttoned jacket was unusual for somebody who was freezing to death. His complexion was described as bluish red, and he also had dried blood on his lips. The knuckles on his right hand had brown-red bruises. Such injuries common in hand-to-hand fights. There were no internal injuries, and cause of his death was also stated as hypothermia. He was also not wearing any footwear, but had one cotton sock on his left foot and one woolen sock on his right foot. This uneven distribution was maybe due to the reason that at one time he had two socks on one foot and later took one off to protect the other barefoot, or it could have belonged to someone in the team who simply gave it to Dyatlov to save him from certain death. The watch on his wrist had stopped working at 5:31. Zenaida Kolmogorova. Body of Zina was found at a distance of 630 meters from the cedar tree, facing down and heading towards the tent. Her skin complexion was described as purple-red. She was much better dressed than the bodies found under the cedar tree. She was wearing two hats, long-sleeve undershirt, sweater, checkered shirt, and another sweater with torn cuff off the right sleeve. It was not clear if she had cut it, or it was torn by another person. She was also not wearing any shoes. Cause of her death was also noted as hypothermia. Her autopsy revealed that she was not sexually active at the time of her death. This fact is only relative to assess the nature of the relationship between Zenaida and Igor Dyatlov, and if escaped prisoners were to blame for the crime, it's doubtful that they would have left the girls alone. Rustem Slobodin. Rustem's body was found 480 meters from the Cedar on March 5th. His body was covered under 50 centimeters of snow. His face was down, and he was also heading towards the tent. He wore a long-sleeve undershirt, shirt, sweater, 2 pairs of pants, 4 pairs of socks, and 1 felt boot on his right foot. His watch stopped working at 8:45 a.m. According to his autopsy report, the fracture on his skull could also be the result of being hit with some blunt object. It also stated that after the initial blow to his head, he could have also suffered a possible loss of coordination, which might have sped up his death from hypothermia. However, medical examiner drew this conclusion very carefully, and all of the bruises and scratches on his body were blamed on his last-minute agony. Although it did state that how he managed to harm his exterior hands and legs was beyond explanation, because when a person normally falls, it is usually the palms that suffer the most damage of the fall, as well as medial aspects of the legs. Bilateral injuries to the head are less common. It is also unusual to harm the face and sides of the skull, while back of the head has no damage at all. In case of Rustem's body, the injury pattern is quite the opposite of what we would see in a freezing man. It looks like that Rustem fell repeatedly on his head while walking down the mountain, and on each of his fall, he managed to hit the sides of his head. This was quite unusual for a man who is probably in a better physical shape than anyone else in the group. Even a long ski trip could not be held responsible for such clumsiness. His body was on an icy bed, which formed from the hardening of the thawing snow. This means that his body fell when it was relatively warm, and there was a noticeable heat exchange into the surroundings. The remaining 4 bodies of the hikers were not discovered for the next 2 months. When the snow started melting in May, a Mansi native named Kirikov with his dog noticed some branches that were laid down in the form of a trail. Following these branches, at a distance of 50 meters from Cedar Tree, he found black cotton sweatpants and left half of a woman's light brown wool sweater. This sweater belonged to Lyudmila Dubinina. Lyudmila wore 2 sweaters and 2 long-sleeve shirts. The brown sweater she was wearing belonged to Yuri Krivonoshenko and later found to be radioactive. She was laying on a natural ledge with water flowing over her open mouth. There were claims in the media that her tongue was ripped or eaten by something, but her autopsy report simply mentions that the tongue is missing, along with hypoglossal muscle and the muscles of the floor of the mouth. It's a bit strange that her autopsy isn't that detailed like the others, and there are no further explanations on this statement, although it mentions that around 100 grams of dark brown mucosal mass was found in her stomach. This is often quoted as coagulated blood and is used by some as an indication that the heart was beating and the blood was flowing when the tongue was removed from the mouth. Her cause of death was stated as hemorrhage into right atrium of the heart, multiple fractured ribs, and internal bleeding. Medical examination also showed that she was not sexually active at the time of death. This was only stated because whoever did the crime did not sexually assault the girls. Semyon Zolotaryov. Semyon was wearing 2 hats, scarf, 2 shirts, a sweater, and a coat when his body was found. It was clear that he did not die of cold in that den. His lower body was also protected with a pair of socks and a pair of warm leather handmade shoes known as burqa. These were enough for keeping him alive. Additionally, he also had camera around his neck, and this camera came as complete surprise to the Yuri Yudin. As per his knowledge, team had only 4 cameras, and now a 5th camera had turned up on the body. Unfortunately, melting water had damaged the film, but still, this question lingered as to why he left the tent with a camera, and why did he take 2 cameras to the trip. One camera was used on a daily basis, and everybody saw it, and it was found in the tent, but the other one was only found after his death. The question remains that what did he capture on the slope of the mountain that day? He was also holding a pen and small notepad in his hands. One of the rescuers recalls that Colonel Ordyurkov grabbed the notepad and looked at it, cursed, and said, "He's written nothing." To this day, he seems to be the only person who had seen this notepad, and it was never filed in evidence or seen by anyone else. Both Semyon and Lyudmila had interesting pattern of injuries. They were similar in direction and force, despite differences in shape, height, and body composition of the two. This would suggest that whatever caused these injuries was a uniform event. On Lyudmila, the multiple fracture of the ribs was bilateral and symmetrical, while on Semyon, it was on one side. They both had hemorrhaging into the cardiac muscle and into the pleural cavity, which means that they both were alive when injured, and this happened as a result of the action of large force. But none of the soft tissue of the chest was damaged. Such wounds are very similar to the type of the trauma that results from a shockwave of a bomb. After these injuries, Lyudmila could have been conscious for 10 to 20 minutes. Semyon could have lived for longer. Alexander Kolevatov. Body of Alexander was well insulated. He was protected by 2 shirts, 2 sweaters, and ski jacket, which was unbuttoned and unzipped. This was again a strange finding for a person who had supposedly died of cold and hypothermia. The waistband of his sweater and lower parts of his trousers were later tested radioactive. His autopsy report was also silent on the nature of his injuries. His nose was broken, and he had a deformed neck along with an open wound behind his ear, which could be the result of a fight. On the other hand, it could also be caused by natural elements. The snapped back and blow behind the ear are a common sign of killing, performed by special forces. However, we can't be sure about this as autopsy report did not specify any more details, and we are left guessing about the nature and origin of these injuries. Nikolai Thibault Brino. Body of Nikolai was well protected against coldness of Siberian winter, as he and Semyon might have been outside of the tent when this mysterious threat struck them. This explains why both of them were wearing hiker shoes and several layers of clothes, and were much better dressed when they were forced to abandon their tent. He was wearing woolen hats, 2 shirts, wool sweaters, and a fur jacket along with woolen gloves. And he was wearing woolen socks along with a pair of felt Valenki boots, which are perfect for Siberian winter. Cadaveric spots were discovered on the back of his upper body and upper extremities. He had a deep, depressed, multi-splintered fracture. Medical examiner excluded an accidental fall on the rock as a possible cause for such a massive and unusual fracture, and stated that, "I don't believe these injuries could have been the result of Nikolai simply falling from the level of his own height, for example, falling and hitting his head. This kind of injury could have only occurred if he had been thrown into the air and hit his head against the rocks." Lack of damage to the soft tissue showed that he could not have been hit by a rock in someone's hand. After this severe concussion, he could not have been able to move and could only be carried or dragged, and might have shown signs of life for 2 to 3 hours. Now, let's analyze few of the most important aspects of this case, starting from the tent. The tent is the most important piece of evidence in the chain of events. This is where the tragedy started to unravel. The sides of the tent were cut from inside, and hikers chose to exit the tent through sides while completely ignoring the entrance of the tent. At that time, it was only thought that during the night, someone surprised and attacked the hikers after cutting the tent. One of the investigators, while recalling the incident, stated that major breakthrough in the case was made by accident, when a woman who was called to repair his uniform took one look at the tent and with confidence said that the tent was cut from inside. Later, forensic analysts confirmed that the tent was indeed cut from inside. According to the forensic report, campsite consisted of a pad of flattened snow. On the bottom are stacked 8 pairs of skis for tent support and insulation. Tent is stretched on poles and fixed with ropes. At the bottom of the tent, 9 backpacks were discovered with various personal items: jackets, boots, warm fur coats, stove, axes, saw, blankets, food, and cameras. The nature and form of all cuts suggested that they were formed by contact with the canvas inside of the tent with the blade of some weapon, presumably a knife. Some of the cuts from inside didn't make it all the way through. The satirical propaganda leaflet named Evening Otterton was found near the entrance of the camp. It was put together by the hikers on the night of incidents. It just shows that the morale of hikers was high, and they took time to write it. Here is the translation from this leaflet. In recent years, there has been a heated debate about existence of Yeti. According to recent reports, Yeti lives in the northern Ural, near Mount Ortorton. This innocent reference would later give birth to so many of the Yeti theories. The entrance of the tent was in direction of south, while north part was covered with 15 to 20 centimeters of snow. From the density and appearance of the snow, it was concluded that it was formed not due to any avalanche, rather was formed by wind. A pair of their skis were sticking out from the snow. In case of any avalanche, they cannot remain like this. Near the entrance of the tent in the snow was an ice axe and Dyatlov's jacket. It was strange that Dyatlov took off his jacket outside of the tent. On the side of the tent, on top of 10 centimeters of snow, rescuers also found Dyatlov's flashlight in working condition. One of the rescuers said that, "We couldn't understand why the snow under the flashlight was 10 centimeters thick, yet there wasn't any on the flashlight itself." As the rescuers did not expect the hikers to be dead at this point, so they did not make any attempts to preserve or record footprints of people around the Dyatlov Pass. It is still an open discussion as to how many people were really there in the pass on that day. But from testimony of rescuers and available photographs, we can estimate that there were definitely 8 to 9 tracks of footprints left by hikers who were not wearing any footwear. Their footprints left characteristic columns of pressed snow with footprints on top. Members of the group all walked in a single file, with a tall man walking in the back. Overall, it was an organized, uneventful descent. Several trails would deviate from the general direction, but eventually would rejoin the group. There were other footprints also discovered and photographed, but nobody knows if they were left by someone else or rescuers themselves. In the end, after reading through all of the information available on the tent, I have reached this conclusion that they left without outer clothes, shoes, and gloves. Only a threat of exceptional danger would force a group of 9 young and physical fit people to leave their shelter in a winter evening into a completely uninhabited forest. I think, whatever they faced, it meant an immediate death in the tent, or going down the hill without their survival equipment. They had left 3 axes and 3 finished knives in the tent, and whatever the danger they faced, they did not seem it fit to confront it with axes and knives. They left their tent without any of the essential clothing that would help them survive Siberian winter, and they did not go down in the direction of their storage site, but rather went for the forest on the opposite side. Their storage seemed undisturbed. Now, let's take a look at another important aspect of this case: the Cedar Tree. Bodies of first 2 hikers were found at a distance of 1.5 kilometers from their tents. Looking around the area carefully, rescuers found a flat area next to the cedar, and there they found remains of the fire. Bodies of hikers were found at a distance of 2-3 meters from this fire. From accounts of multiple rescuers, we see that all of them observed the same facts. One of the rescuers said that next to the bodies was a fire. Nearby were more than 10 small fir tree branches, cut with a finished knife. The lower dry branches, of about 5 centimeters diameter, had been cut from the cedar. Some of these were lying next to the fire. The snow around was trampled. Captain Chernyshov stated that it's possible to conclude that other people had since been by the fire. We found various garments next to it rather than on the bodies, but we didn't find any other bodies. The trees near the fire had been cut with knives, but we found no knives with the bodies. Maslenikov stated that, maybe with the help of others, they had made a pretty good fire with the branches of fir trees, and those branches had been burning for maybe an hour and a half. 8-centimeter branches of cedar had burned through. The tall cedar tree also held some clues about the events of the night. Captain Chernyshov stated that all the low branches of the cedar within arm's reach were broken completely. One was cut 4 or 5 meters high. They were thick. These types of branches are extremely difficult to break, even if, for instance, you hang on them with the whole weight of your body. Atmaniki stated that most of the dry branches up to 5 meters were broken. Beside this, the side of the tree facing the slope and the tent was completely cleared of branches. These were not dry. They were young and were not used. Some of them were just lying on the ground, and the others were hanging on the lower branches of the cedar. It looked as if someone had created a viewing height facing the site from where they came. After analyzing all of the details that are available on the cedar tree, I have reached the conclusion that the hikers had expected the same danger to approach them here also. To keep an eye on approaching danger from the tents, they climbed the cedar and only cleared all the branches facing in the direction of tents. These cuttings were not meant for burning, but were just hanging from the cut-off tops. Also, from the trampled snow, it seemed that more than 2 people engaged in a great effort to gather woods for protection, which indicates that after descending from the hill, at one time, all of them were together around this fire, and then something or someone also surprised them here, which made the team split. 2 of the hikers climbed the cedar, and remaining hikers fled deeper into the woods. These 2 tried their best to stay on the tree for as long as possible. Krivonoshenko bit his own hand in desperation to get any response, but probably, due to exhaustion and freezing temperatures, could not stay on the tree any longer and fell from the tree. This fall proved deadly for Doroshenko, as gray foaming liquid was found on his cheek, while Krivonoshenko landed in or near the fire and burned his socks and parts of his body. After falling to the ground, he also could not move due to exhaustion and hypothermia, and later died not too far from the fire. Once the danger seemed to have passed, their teammates returned, and after finding them dead, laid down their bodies with respect, and divided their clothes among each other. Dyatlov and 2 of the hikers decided to go back to their camp for more supplies. On their journey back to the camp, the same danger also approached them, which explains injuries to the Dyatlov's hands and fracture to Rustam's skull. The remaining 4 hikers who had ventured back into the forest and started digging up a den to protect themselves from the freezing winds. Now, let's take a look at the den in detail. Until now, the investigators were still considering this incident as freezing to death, although some of the details were raising questions. Doroshenko had pulmonary edema and contusion as a result of blunt trauma. To stifle a cry or to stay on the tree, Krivonoshenko in desperation had bitten a piece of his own hand and had 3rd-degree burns that cannot be sustained if one simply falls asleep if still alive. Dyatlov vomiting blood, and Zenaida had baton-shaped bruise on her waist. Rustam's skull trauma could not be attributed to clumsiness or disorientation. Somebody hit him on the head. Also, there were questions of why the knife that was used to cut the branches could not be found. Still, nobody was suspecting of foul play. The bodies found in the den changed the whole course of investigation. On one hand, the hikers showed that they were sane enough to do anything in their power to survive. But on the other hand, it still did not make sense as to why their attempts did not work. The den was made by surviving hikers, and it would provide them good protection against cold winds. As Semyon had served in the army, so it was probably his idea. This was a common way to survive winters at the fronts, and in their situation, it offered the best chance of survival. Here again, the theory of paradoxical undressing did not make sense, as hikers laid out cedar branches in the den to avoid contact with cold snow underneath. Lyudmila by that time was wearing radioactive sweater and pants out of Krivonoshenko. However, the case became even more strange when their bodies were discovered. All 3 members were crushed with immense force, and their bodies were not found in the den but at a distance of few feet away. Alexander was trying to protect Semyon's body, and Thibault's body was at a distance of 30 centimeters in the downstream. Only Colonel Ordyukov had seen the notepad found on their bodies, and its whereabouts are still unknown. One of the key rescuers, named Vladimir Asgnadze, also stated that he felt strongly about those in charge were not really interested in a proper investigation and already had a theory. The whole operation was rushed, atmosphere was quite tensed, and everyone was waiting for answers, and someone from Moscow was pushing for a speedy investigation. Once the bodies had been taken out of the den, helicopter pilots refused to take the bodies, citing that it was out of their official duties. It has been said that they had already suspected the bodies to be poisoned or radioactive and did not want them on the helicopter. The crew further demanded that the bodies be covered in zinc coffins. At this point, Colonel Ordyukov took his pistol and threatened to shoot the crew on sight. Vladimir Asgnadze intervened, and bodies were repacked and finally lifted for the transportation. After going through all of the evidence available on the den, I have reached the conclusion that after digging the den, the 4 skiers were temporarily out of the way of freezing winds. They were also well dressed enough to keep them alive. Their bodies were discovered at a distance of few feet from the den, which to me indicates that they ventured out of their den to look for the 3 friends, who had decided to go back to the tent. After finding their friends dead, they decided to return to their den, but then, something or someone again struck them. Bodies of 3 of them were almost crushed by that force, and made it difficult for them to move, and they died within minutes of receiving these injuries. Now, let's take a look at one more important aspect of this investigation. Radioactive contamination. Claims made in the media state that some of the hikers' clothing was found to be highly radioactive. Examinations of these clothes were done by the main radiologist at Sverdlovsk. After rinsing the clothes in a cold running water for 3 hours, the contamination was decreased between 30 and 60%. This contamination could not have been possible under normal circumstances. The normal contamination level of beta particles for 150 centimeters squared is around 5,000 beta particles per minute. Dubinina's brown sweater had a decay rate of 9,900 beta particles per minute. The sweater from Kolevatov had a value of 5,600 beta particles per minute, and the trouser had a contamination level of 5,000 beta particles per minute. The radiologist concluded that either the clothes were contaminated from radioactive dust, or they became contaminated by coming in direct contact of radioactive substances. He also stated that the actual level of contamination of some parts of clothes was many times more, and we must also consider the fact that the clothes had been washed in the running water of a ravine with differing degrees of intensity. I think the most logical explanation of radioactivity is that these clothing items belonged to Alexander and Krivonoshenko, and both of them had directly worked at nuclear power plants and nuclear fuel enrichment facilities before, and therefore had this contamination from their jobs. This seems to be one of those points which has been overblown in the media, but in reality, I do not find it odd that the only slightly radioactive clothing items belong to the people who are already working for nuclear facilities. Let's get right into the possible explanations of this unsolved mystery. KGB agents. According to the Alexei Rakitin, author of the book Dyatlov Pass, Semyon Zolotaryov, Alexander Kolevatov, and Yuri Krivonoshenko were in fact KGB agents. Their mission was to uncover a hidden cell of CIA agents. They were supposed to deliver radioactive samples to the Americans and take their pictures in return. But something in their deal went wrong, and all of them were killed by CIA agents. According to this theory, the agents in the group had to deliver radioactive clothes to CIA, and rest of the group was unaware of their mission. Background of some of the skiers also gave rise to this theory. Semyon joined the group at last minute and did not know the group before. He was a veteran who had fought for Stalin's special forces and had several years of combat experience. Alexander was working for a top-secret atomic institute known as P.O. Box 3394, and Yuri Krivonoshenko had worked for another notorious atomic institute, only known as P.O. Box 40410. Behind all three, the shadow of KGB looms large. According to Alexei, these 3 KGB agents were supposed to deliver radioactive samples to CIA agents, and on February 1st, their meeting took place, but something went wrong. CIA agents realized that trio were possibly double agents. Conflict ensued, which led to a fight, torture, and a brutal massacre of the entire group. This theory has many loopholes in it. Example, one of the friends of Dyatlov said, "They were tough guys. To scare the daylights out of them, you need something extraordinary, something astonishing." Gulag Fugitives. This theory came from a private investigator who stated that the skiers could have been mistaken for escaped prisoners from local Gulag prison camps and could have been killed in a cleanup operation by the military. Many small concentration camps of political prisoners were dispersed all over Siberia, and closest one was located just a few miles away from the site of incidents. Many of these political prisoners were taken from fronts of World War II, and they knew how to kill people, and skiers could have been taken for unwanted witnesses. Also, surviving members of the team Yuri Yudin found a piece of clothing that did not belong to any of the group members. This obmatki was a wide piece of clothing that is used to keep legs warm, and is made of a particular material and has a very distinct shape. This cloth was mostly used by soldiers during World War and later in Stalin's concentration camps. Nobody knows from where it came and to whom it belonged. Radiosondes. Vladimir Negev, who served as head of faculty of Military Medical Hospital in Russia, in 2018 published a trilogy which revealed mechanisms of death of Dyatlov group. According to him, Dyatlov Group died during a scientific experiment of national importance, in which they had to launch special-purpose radio probes in the area. These radiozones had a chloroprene shell which was filled with a gas of short-lived radioactive isotopes. During this time, meteorological rockets were also used in the region, and one of these rockets might have struck the radiozones and spilled the radioactive isotopes. These highly toxic chemicals oxidize quickly and disappear from the body within 3 to 5 minutes, and a coroner may not be able to detect the toxic chemicals. However, traces of its effects remain in the organs of the infected person. These effects include, for example, pulmonary edema, expansion of the borders of the heart, mainly the right half, fullness of organs, and liquid dark blood. Skiers had similar signs of damage to their internal organs by toxic chemicals, including pulmonary edema, changes in the borders of the heart, mainly the right half, fullness of organs, and liquid dark blood. Also, the medical examiner, after looking at the injuries of the skiers in the den, had said that as if a balloon had burst between them. Skin color of the skiers, as reported by many witnesses, was of dark brown color, which is a characteristic of phosphorus poisoning, and also corroborates this theory. Special Forces. In the book Mountain of the Dead, British author Keith McCloskey stated that the group by mistake stumbled upon a military testing area and were killed by the Soviet soldiers who were protecting the area. The scenario presented in the book is that of power struggle between high-ranking officers in military and KGB and illegal use of military equipment. During this time, the 21st Communist Party Congress was taking place in Moscow, and everyone was on high alert. During this period, some military officers who were friends with some top Moscow bosses had gone hunting in the valley with the help of Mansi hunters. KGB was fully aware of what was happening, and a KGB boss who wanted to discredit the military's boss planned to get evidence of this disallowed hunt. Therefore, KGB sent their operator Semyon Zolotaryov to get evidence of it. Semyon was supposed to take photographs of the helicopter when it was in the air, but while he was taking these photographs, he was also seen by the military people in the helicopter. Upon their return, the officers realized that photos of their illegal hunts had been taken, and they sent their trusted military men to do whatever it takes to bring this camera back. These men found the camp on the slope of the mountain. Their instructions were to do it without any bloodshed, but they were probably met with resistance by the group, who probably did not understand what and why was it happening, except for Semyon and probably Dyatlov, as these military men had no idea that the order of taking photographs came from KGB. Zolotaryov, realizing the strength of his backers, probably did not want to give up the camera so easily. Things got out of control, and he was killed by the men. Once they realized their mistake, they did not want to leave any more witnesses, and decided to kill everyone in the group. These military men were well versed in killing without leaving any external marks. Using their broad skis, they also cleared any of the tracks left in the snow. Military officers and their men later realized that they were in deep trouble for their usage of helicopter and killing of Dyatlov Group. Therefore, it was in the best interest of all the ministries involved to cover up this whole story. Party leaders did not want the general public or foreign interest to know about this power struggle, and the person in charge of the investigation was strictly ordered to close the case as soon as possible, to which he obliged by writing a bland conclusion. Mansi. As there were no prison escapees from Gulag concentration camps, the indigenous Mansi people were then suspected of this crime. Within 2 weeks of the investigation, the prevalent theory was that the group was discovered by some evil Mansi hunters who committed this crime. The arguments for this theory were that a Mansi chum was found at a distance of 200 feet where the group has camped a night before. Mansi also knew the area very well and had all of their required skills to cover their ski tracks and hunt the hikers into the woods. The unique injuries of skiers also pointed towards somebody who was used to hunt down and kill animals. One argument in favor of this theory points out that the photograph taken by the group, which shows a blurred human figure, or as some say, a Yeti, behind the tree line. According to this hypothesis, Mansi hunters were stalking the group, and the group surprised them by taking picture of one of the stalkers. This was the reason why Dyatlov decided to camp in the open, so they can easily see anyone approaching the tent from a distance. Mansi people were secluded and proud people who have considered these mountains to be their sacred hunting grounds. In short, their mysterious, sacred places of worships, prayer houses, and mysterious stones further fueled the desire of atheist Soviet prosecutors who wanted to blame this crime on Mansi. Therefore, it is not a surprise that the only official hypothesis till this day is that Mansi hunters were involved somehow in the death of the Dyatlov group. But like other possible theories, there are inconsistencies here too. For example, hikers' belongings were left in the open for more than a month, and included boots, clothes, food, and money. The amount found in the tent and on Rustam's body was around 2,000 rubles. This was the budget of whole expedition, and was a considerable amount of money back then. Mansi people were poor people, and sometimes their kids did not even have boots, clothes, food, and money. But none of their belongings were missing. Still, this did not bother the Soviet investigators who wanted to blame it on the Mansi people. Many young Mansi hunters were arrested and interrogated. To this day, nobody knows about the fate of these unfortunate people. Avalanche snow slab. Mount Syakhl is not a tall mountain and is not very steep. Also, avalanches are not common in this area. Skiers had in their diaries also mentioned a fairly thin snow cover on the mountain, but it could be that a thin slab of snow simply shifted and rolled over the tent. This would create havoc among the hikers in the tent who realized that they were suddenly trapped underneath several feet of snow. This would also explain why they cut the tent from inside. They could have considered the possibility of a second avalanche, and therefore decided to retreat. But instead of going back to the place of their storage site, made a mistake and descended into the valley. Strong winds, which are quite common in this area, later erased all signs of this natural disaster. Like all other theories, this theory also has its gaps. From the footprints, it can be assessed that their descent was quite organized. It is not possible that the 3 people who had broken ribs and injuries to the head would be transportable at all without help from their groupmates. Secondly, they were experienced, well-trained, and well aware of the chances of freezing to death without their warm clothes and footwear, which means whatever it was did not give them enough time to take their warm clothes and footwear, or they were forced to descend in a file without their life-saving equipment. Finally, if we look at the pictures taken by the rescuers, we see that their skis had still kept their vertical position on the slopes, even though weeks had passed. Plus, the entrance of the tent was still in vertical position, and only the middle portion had collapsed, most probably due to the unorganized escape of the skiers from the tent. UFO. Some conspiracy theorists also suggest the UFOs scared the group away. Although, possibility of the group encountering a UFO is less likely. This claim might also have some truth behind it. With recent confirmations from Pentagon about the UFO videos, we do know that there are indeed some things going on that we, at the moment, cannot explain. Around the same time, Soviet armed forces also launched some rockets from Baikonur base, and although the military said that all of the rockets landed in Ural Mountains, some geologists 70 kilometers from the mountains also saw some glowing and pulsating lights going into the direction of Dyatlov Pass. Lev Ivanov, the in charge of investigation at Dyatlov Pass, in an interview back in 1990s, stated that he and another investigator had also noticed that pines in the forest were burnt at top, and references about these unidentified objects were also included in the investigation reports. These also included the pictures of flying spheres drawn by the Mansi hunters and other testimonies from that time. But under pressure from A.P. Kirilenko and his deputy A.F. Yeshtokin, he took out all references and evidence material from the official investigation reports about fireballs or a UFO. He stated that, when E.P. Maslenikov and I examined the scene in May, we found that some young pine trees at the edge of the forest had burn marks, but those marks did not have a concentric form or some other pattern. There was no epicenter. This once again confirmed that heated beams of a strong, but completely unknown, at least to us, energy, were directing their firepower towards specific objects, and in this case, people. Infrasound. Donny Eichar, the author of the book, Dead Mountain, has spent years searching this incident, stated that wind phenomenon known as Karaman Vortex Street could have scared the skiers as it produces a terrifying and powerful sound. Due to unique topography of Kholat Syakhl Mountain and its dome-like shape, wind blowing in a straight line would be twisted into a series of small but powerful tornadoes. These tornadoes could have created a deafening noise even if they missed the tent directly. Under certain conditions, these can also produce a subtle and terrifying phenomenon known as infrasound. These sounds cannot be picked by human ear, but new studies have shown that these infrasounds have significant effects on human body, including loss of sleep, shortness of breath, and extreme dread. IHR believes the combination of infrasound and deafening noise of tornadoes in a pitch-black tent could scare even the most experienced and brave adventurer. Yeti. No, we are just not going there. So it does not make sense to say anything here. But I would say that Discovery Channel in their documentary about this incident aired a photo of some unidentified figure and labeled it as a possible Yeti. If we look at the photo in detail, it does not even look like a Yeti. Rather, with those short, thin arms, it looks like another skier. Take a look at this photograph taken right after the first one. And to me personally, it looks like that the person in both of the pictures is same. Taking perfect photographs each time with the camera technology of those days was a challenging task. Lightning strike, ball lightning. Another unexplained atmospheric electrical phenomenon that could be responsible for Dyatlov Pass incident is ball lightning. These balls of lightning can vary in size from few centimeters to several meters, and usually last longer than a typical lightning strike. The makeshift tripod near the tent suggests that they were observing something in the sky. Mansi people and other reliable witnesses had also described seeing lights in the sky that night. These lights were also captured in one of the photographs. It is possible that the group got scared due to ball lightning getting very close to the tent and hovering over their tent and melting the snow beneath it. The group then descended into the valley and lit a fire while they waited for the object to disappear. This theory also states the first two hikers probably died due to single lightning strike, which caused burnt hair, bleeding head orifices, large burns on their bodies, pulmonary edema, and tree damage. The death of remaining 4 hikers in the den also occurred due to a powerful lightning strike near the den, which vaporized substantial quantity of stream water and snow, thus creating an explosion, which was further amplified by the small confines of the den. And as a result of this explosion, bodies of all skiers were thrown into air. 3 of the skiers hit rocks upon their landing and received fatal injuries. Lev Ivanov, who was the in charge of this investigation, also favored this fireball theory. The stove. This photo was taken 1 day before the incident, and possibly sparks from the stove had accidentally set the jacket on fire. Clark Wilkins, the author of the book, A Compelling Unknown Force, the Dyatlov Pass incident, states that the hikers left the tent due to smoke from the stove. As this was a custom stove made by Dyatlov, he thinks that once the exhaust pipe was removed, the embers inside the tent were accidentally reignited, and without exhaust pipe, the tent was full of smoke within seconds. Due to this, the skiers panicked and cut open the tent. About their injuries, he stated that blood coming from their mouths and noses could be an indication of smoke inhalation. As per his theory, some of them were intoxicated, so it would have also affected their judgment and ability to make rational decisions. Like all other theories, this one also has too many gaps. The hikers, once they were out of the tent, wouldn't need to go down the hill to escape the smoke or fire in the tent. Also, they would never completely abandon the tent without their shoes and coats. According to investigators, stove was still in its case and unassembled when the tent was found. Plus, there is no evidence of skiers being intoxicated. The group carried some amount of vodka, but no empty bottles were found. Katabatic wind. Katabatic winds are the type of falling winds which occur when a cold air over a glacier or mountain starts flowing downwards. This phenomenon is also known as gravity wind and is described as a ball rolling downhill by gravity. These winds can sometimes reach the speed of hurricanes. In 1978, such an incident happened to a group of 9 skiers, where a rather calm and pleasant skiing tour suddenly turned into a nightmare with wind speeds up to 20 meters per second. Only one of the skiers survived, and he was found far away from the temporary shelter that they had made. Katabatic winds of speed up to 81 meters per second were recorded back in 1992 in Sweden. These katabatic winds start flowing downwards if lower areas have relatively warmer air. Dyatlov group, before this incident, had noted in their diary about a relatively warm wind and associated it to a jet engine. This could potentially set in motion the unfortunate events that happened that night. These winds appear suddenly as compared to a storm. In case of a storm, you still have time to dress or securely dismantle your tent, but in case of Katabatic winds, you literally have sometimes seconds to make a decision. In case of Dyatlov group, I think the only survivable scenario was to run out and flatten the tent and wait somewhere else for the winds to calm down. The Dyatlov team acted swiftly and covered their tent with protective snow and left a flashlight there to act as a beacon for relocating the position of the tent. In the photos taken by the investigation team, clear traces of snow can be seen from the peak of the mountain towards the tent. Strong winds left hollowed out, scoop-shaped cavities around the tent. These extreme winds would also make it difficult for the team to stand upright. And we know that Rustam had injuries on his skull, as if he had fallen multiple times on his head. Such winds have taken lives around Katabatic Mountain after this incident also. In early 1960s, a plane carrying 9 pilots and geologists suddenly crashed because of these winds. For some time, flights were completely banned in this area. In 2009, a helicopter again crashed in the same region because pilots ignored the no-fly zone warning. Fortunately, they survived the crash, but said that they could not explain why their helicopter went down so quickly and without any warnings from the equipments. In early 2000s, a group of 9 hikers under the supervision of observers attempted the same descent on the slope of Katabatic under similar weather conditions. Despite nighttime and thick snow cover, the participants made the descent without any significant injuries or cuts. Those who observed the descent said that the skiers did not have any difficulty in locating members of the group at all times, and they could easily maintain vocal and eye contact between all members. This further adds to the mystery of what really happened that night, and therefore, the case of Dyatlov Pass remains an unsolved mystery till this day. I have spent countless hours of research on this case. This incident has always been one of my favorite unsolved mysteries, long before I decided to make videos for YouTube. After going through all of the evidence and reading all of the Russian translations, I have reached a conclusion. But before we begin, I must say that I am completely open to the theories and explanations coming from you guys. I think in this case, we will never be sure of what really happened, and as I said in the beginning, a definite conclusion will always be elusive. Arthur Conan Doyle once said, "When you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth." In this case, once we rule out aliens and Yetis, I think whatever remains, even though possibility of that happening was quite low, is the truth. As per my understanding, the skiers did see strange lights or lightning balls in the sky that night, which they also photographed. 2 of the skiers who were outside at that moment saw these lightning balls coming towards their tent and hurried inside to alert their friends. At the same time, these lights started hovering over the entrance of the tent. Skiers who were in state of confusion probably got really terrified and escaped through the sides of the tent. Once they were outside, the strange phenomenon was temporarily over, but the group was so scared that it would happen again that they decided to head down into the valley. Now the question as to why they did not take their warm clothes or boots with them, as we see from the photos that the tent had collapsed in the middle, and maybe none of them wanted to enter the tent again from the closed sides to get their clothes due to fear of this phenomenon happening again. Also, in their confusion, they might have thought that they were heading into the direction of their storage site and would have enough supplies there to keep them alive for that night. After reaching the tree line and realizing their mistake, all of them gathered woods and lit a fire. 2 of the skiers climbed the tree and cleared all of the branches in the direction of the tent, maybe to keep an eye in the direction of the tent to see if that phenomenon would descend into the valley also. Once around the fire, referring to my previous analysis on the cedar tree, I think that phenomenon suddenly started happening here also. This made the group split temporarily. 2 of the hikers climbed the tree and later fell from it and died due to exhaustion, hypothermia, accidental burns, and injuries from the fall. Rustam, on the other hand, while running in the snow, fell and injured his skull. Once the phenomenon was over, their friends found the 2 skiers dead upon their return and divided their clothes among themselves. At this point, the group decided to split. Igor and Zenaida decided to take Rustam back to the tent due to his injuries, while one of them was to return with warm clothes, boots, for remaining 4 members. As Rustam wasn't capable of much movement, his friends had to carry his weight, and this made their process quite slow and exhausted them pretty quickly. All 3 of them died of exhaustion and hypothermia on their way back towards the tent. Remaining 4 skiers dug up the den and were safe from the freezing temperatures for the time being. But unfortunately, here too, the same lightning bolts struck and created a huge explosion in the den. The shockwave from the explosion catapulted their bodies into the air, and upon landing, all of them hit rocks. Due to these fatal injuries, exhaustion, and freezing temperatures, these 4 also could not survive that tragic night. That, to me, seems the most logical explanation of this incident, and also corroborates eyewitness accounts, medical examiners' observations, having no external injuries, burnt pine tree tops, and most importantly, leaving their campsite in a state of fear without their equipment. What do you guys think really happened that night? Please let us know your thoughts in the comments section below.